90% of all businesses don't make it a year. 95% don't make it 5 years. And 9 times out of 10, it's not because of lack of need, it's because of stick to itiveness from the person who founded the business. They gave up too early. I don't think it's so much the entrepreneurship, but the hunger. You got to be hungry. If you're not hungry for more, you're going to do the minimum and get by. An entrepreneur, my definition of an entrepreneur, you have to like this, is someone who gives up a 9 to 5 job that pays okay for a 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. job that doesn't pay at all for the first year. You're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. So you're either going someplace or you're sitting where you're at. And if where you're at's fine, that's okay. Nobody wants what you're selling. Everybody wants to solve a problem they have.
Today on Business Growth Talks, we have Eric Shulman, who is a sales trainer, business consultant, and founder of Truth-Based Selling, a sales methodology built around honest conversations rather than pressure tactics. With over 50 years worth of experience in the sales world, Eric's mission is to help entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners master the art of selling without selling. Through interactive real-time workshops and coaching programs, he teaches practical sales techniques as a prioritizing connection, clarity, and client trust. Hello, Eric. How are you today?
Mark, I'm doing wonderful today, and that sounds really impressive.
To be honest, Eric, you are an impressive guy. I would absolutely. I think I could have gone on for another 10 minutes with your intro. How the experience that you've got.
I'm much older than I look.
Thank you very much for joining me.
I started very young. I was 12 years old when I started in sales.
So so you should know what you're doing. Like, in all honesty, you should be able to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, some of us have trouble painting between the lines sometimes.
Right.
But I've had fun. I've made a good living, and I've helped a lot of other people do the same. And hopefully, somebody will get something out of this conversation we're having today that'll help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll get loads of value that you'll add today. So, as in all of my interviews, the first question I ask all of my guests is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
Interesting question. A business mindset. In order to be a business person, you have to think a little bit differently. You want to paint between the lines ethically, but you've got to be able to remain extremely focused because business people, as you probably know, face an awful lot of rejection when they try and get started. And unless you're completely and utterly focused on that end goal of whatever you want to achieve with the business, you're going to be discouraged along the way and you're going to quit. 90% of all businesses don't make it a year, 95% don't make it 5 years. And 9 times out of 10, it's not because of lack of need, it's because of stick to itiveness from the person who founded the business. They gave up too early.
What do you think? How can people recognize when that time to give up and do something else, or keep moving forward and keep motoring on? Is there it's not an exact science, I'm sure of it, but from your experience of working with people, have you seen people go and give up before they'd really given it a good chance?
It's not so much giving up before they've given it a good chance. A lot of times people will hang on much longer than they should. They get emotionally attached to the business. I've got this great idea for a business, whether you're going to sell something, make something, do something, or represent something. And it sounds wonderful. You spend a lot of time and effort, a lot of emotion goes into it. You go out there, you hit the streets with it, you get some sort of reception from it. Maybe you make enough to get right about here. And the second time you're still right about here and maybe a little underwater. How do you know when to pull the plug? How do you notice, you know what, this was a good idea, it's just not economically viable? I've done
Yeah.
that several times with businesses where we tried to launch something, we did some preliminary stuff, we even spent some money and time, maybe put out a first edition or first issue of whatever it is we're doing. As the amount of effort for the amount of money wasn't commensurate.
Right.
I got into business, Mark, for one reason. You're going to love this. I am what you call ambitiously lazy. I want to make a lot of freaking money. I don't want to have to work hard to do it. I don't know about you, but most salespeople are ambitiously lazy. They want to
Yeah.
sell what can I make the most money on the quickest? And so most business people, They get emotionally involved, and even though they're not making enough money, they still persist at something, and sometimes they can break through. But a lot of times, that initial resistance is too great, and they can't break through it.
Yeah.
It's knowing when to pull that plug, knowing to say, you know what, this was a good idea. I'll give you one that we did. I was approached by a guy right after the whole Harvey Weinstein thing broke. And he was a guy who was an analytics guy working for a market trading company that taught people how to trade stocks and do day trading.
Yeah.
Very smart guy, a few years older than me. And he got in touch with me and he said, I've got an idea for a company called Harassment Analytics so that companies could basically test their people with a survey type of a thing and decide not only were they at risk for sexual harassment charges, but who was most likely to do it based upon how they reacted and the choices they gave on different scenarios. We spent about 3 or 4 months, spent several thousands of dollars, worked with a programmer in England, set up the website. I set up the corporation. We went out there, we started running this up against people, and we found something interesting out 3 months in. Companies didn't want to know if they were at risk because then that would make them even more liable.
Right.
So, what we thought would have been a great product, yes, there was a place for it, but it just wasn't the right thing. And Al and I, we pulled the plug and said, you know what, this isn't
Fascinating.
going to work. We gave it a shot. But I always have one or two ideas in the background like that are running. And if you've got something that looks viable, play with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Ride a few times, but you need to pull the plug.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a sound advice on that whole idea of starting, building, and when to give up. You need to be able to know when to stop just as much as when to keep going. Next question. Tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
I grew up in a business family. My grandfather on one side owned a candy store and apartments in Philadelphia. On the other side, my grandfather was a compounding pharmacist right outside of Philadelphia. And growing up, the family always was working. And we would go to visit my grandfather. I would go down into the drugstore. I would, of course, take all the comic books upstairs to read them. But after a while, he put me behind the register and he let me learn how to make change and ring things up and count pills out. He would always double count them after I counted them, but he would teach me what he was doing in the back. I would go on deliveries with Percy, Uncle Percy, and make pharmacy deliveries back in the 50s and the early 60s. And so I grew up around a family that worked and had a very close sense of family. My dad opened a record store in 1963. I was 12 years old. I started at the top, sweeping the floor and putting stickers on the records. And then one day, my mom said something to me. When you were young, your mom taught you things. She taught you don't chew your food with your mouth open. It's impolite to talk about money, and probably don't talk to strangers. Okay, my
Yeah.
mom said one day that go wait on that man. My mom said go talk to a stranger. Different messaging.
Yeah.
The reason that people don't like making cold calls, this is fun, but is your mom beat it into you that stranger danger and don't talk to strangers. And
Mm,
now your boss is saying call these strangers. And even though the stranger can't hurt you at 30, 40, 50 years old, there's
mm,
still this 6-year-old inside our head that says, Mom told me not to talk to strangers. And there's that slight hesitancy. And part of what we have to understand to be good at sales, to be good at business, is to get inside our own head in order to control what we're thinking and how we react to things. So I started out in business at a young age. I was an entrepreneur. I sold seeds door to door. I sold greeting cards back when you could do greeting cards and things like that. I sold popcorn in the Boy Scouts. So I had that thing. And I was selling guitars when I was 13 or 14 that cost as much as a good used car back in the 60s. I was selling $1,000 guitars. My first car cost me 850 bucks used. So I knew how to sell expensive stuff to people that were much older than me. So that's where I got my start.
and how crucial is sales versus any other aspect of business?
It doesn't matter how good your product is, if nobody's selling it, you're not making any money. There's the old adage, nothing happens till somebody sells something. So whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a crafter who's knitting or making pretty hats and things like that, until you've sold something, you don't have a business. Once you've sold something, my wife started out that way. She was baking cakes out of the house. People liked them. She started charging for it. She eventually formed Sprinkles Custom Cakes and launched a bakery that became the premier wedding cake baker in Florida. But she started as a small entrepreneur in the house before I knew her. Some of us just have it in our blood. What can I tell
Yeah.
you?
So how much is entrepreneurship innate and how much of it is learned?
I don't think it's so much the entrepreneurship, but the hunger. You got to be hungry. If you're not hungry for more, you're going to do the minimum and get by. And so many people today do the minimum. So if you want more, you're going to have to work harder. An entrepreneur, my definition of an entrepreneur, you like this, is someone who gives up a 9 to 5 job that pays okay for a 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. job that doesn't pay at all for the first year. So if you're not prepared to make no money for 6 months to a year, you're not an entrepreneur. You got to be able to bet on yourself because that's what you're doing. You're saying, I take all this money I could have made this year, and I'm going to bet it that I can do better myself. And the pandemic forced a lot of people who were in cushy jobs to rethink their entire position. I don't know about what you were doing before the pandemic, but a lot of people had traditional businesses or worked in traditional jobs, and then they were sent home for a year or two. And after they painted the condo and did all the things they could around the house, I basically asked myself at 70, what am I going to be when you grow up? And you should be asking yourself that every 5 years, regardless of where you are in life. You're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. So you're either going someplace or you're sitting where you're at. And if where you're at's fine, that's okay. But my mom worked for me full time till she was 84 years old. She died a year and a half ago at 92. Okay, and she was my office manager. All my clients and students
Right.
called her mom. Okay, and I figured I've got at least another 10 years left, so I'm going to keep doing what I do because I really do enjoy it.
Yeah.
If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it.
I know you do. I can just tell by your passion and your love for it. Going specifically into, I understand you worked in the music store and
Yeah,
you helped grow that, and then there was Sandler Training or in Orlando. Tell me about that business.
I went from the music store, and at the tender age of 30, I realized I was never going to get rich in the retail record business with my mom and dad and my two brothers. Too many people, too few stores. And my dad had been telling me since I was 15 or 16, you'll never get rich in the retail business, but you'll make a good living. So I wanted to be rich. I didn't know what rich was. So I left the family business at 30. And I was doing marketing for the last 8 years for all the stores, so I figured I'd stay in marketing. I wound up in 1980 focusing on direct mail marketing. Formed a company called National List Council. Two downstairs bedrooms. I had to buy a computer in 1980. You know what a computer cost in 1980?
No,
20,
lots.
25 megabyte hard drive with 64K of RAM and a one color monitor cost $28,500 with the programming to type letters and keep mailing lists. So I mortgaged my house and bought a computer and started typing letters for people. First class letters with a stamp, with a signature. Made a living. A couple of years later, somebody handed me a manual by David Sandler. I read the manual. You do not learn how to play golf by reading the Ben Hogan book. So I read the Sandler manual, thought I knew how to sell even better. I picked two or three key things out of it. In a 5 year period, I grew that business from my two downstairs bedrooms to 17,000 feet with 54 people. First year, I took $300 out of the business. The last week of the year, I wrote one paycheck to myself just so I could say I got a paycheck.
So how
Sold
did you
that
grow
business.
that business? How were you able to grow that so fast?
I went out and I sold. I was selling 95%. I was a good salesperson. I sold in such a way, and this is where the essence of truth based selling comes from. People either need what you have or they don't. That's a true situation. Mark,
Yeah.
my goal in having the conversation with somebody is not to convince them to buy what I have, but to find out what they actually need and make sure that they need what I have. There's a different tone to the conversation. So if your purpose in having a conversation with a prospect is to become what I call a facilitator of the truth, let's figure out together whether or not what I have is actually going to help you, sir, before I let you buy anything. You take an adversarial position, almost a contrary position, one that is not in your best interest. They realize you are on their side of the conversation, and they will talk more openly to you, and the truth comes out. And then together you figure out whether or not they need what you have, whether they can afford what you have, whether it's cost effective for them to buy it, and whether or not, and how their decision making process needs to work. This becomes a discovery process you do together. So at the end, they get to make a buying decision. And that's the way I grew that business very, very quickly. I became very consultative in how I sold. And I've actually told people you shouldn't do this mailing because you're not going to make money based on everything I've seen. And I show them the numbers, and they say, "Why are you showing this?" Because the last thing world I want to do is do a project for you that doesn't work, and then have you talk bad to hundreds of people. I'd rather not take the money from you and have you keep the money. But that particular guy still did the mailing, was pissed at me afterwards because it didn't work, just like I said it wasn't going to work. But sometimes they don't take your advice. I sold that business in 92 and then met Sharon. She had the little bakery, Sprinkles Custom Cakes. We grew that together from 4 or 5 wedding cakes and a bunch of birthday cakes every month, competing at grocery store prices. First thing I did was raise her prices. She said, "I'll lose half the business on wedding cakes." She was doing 4 wedding cakes a month at $1.25 a slice back in 93 because that was the going price. That's what Goodings and Publix were selling them for, a quarter of a mile on either side of her. And I said this to her. I said, "Cadillac does not compete with Yugo. Today it will be Lexus competing with Kia. They're both cars, but they're totally different brands and they're totally different values." I said, "You need to be $2 a slice." I said, "Do the math. If you lose half the business and only do 2 cakes a month instead of 4, you actually net more dollars." And so she did the math, and she decided that I was going to be sales and marketing and she'll be production. Okay. And we took the business together to 15 to 20 cakes a week in 6 months. People are not only willing to pay for quality, people expect to pay for quality. Most people price their stuff cheaper, and they could actually sell more of it if it was more expensive, especially if it's quality.
There's so many different angles to go into where you've started. So I want to just delve into, you said about truth-based selling. So
Yeah,
what happens if the person doesn't want what you are selling?
nobody wants what you're selling. Everybody wants to solve a problem they have. So if my conversation is not, for instance, I do sales training for a living. And if I'm talking with anybody, I'm talking with you, Mark, I'd say, "Mark, when it comes to sales, your company probably is knocking the ball out of the park. You've got all the new business you need, and you never discount to get it. And all your sales team members are top notch, very well trained." True?
Mm?
Is that the truth?
Yes and no. It's we've got
What do you
we're
mean, no?
doing well. It's just, is there ever enough in your pipeline?
Where do you think you could be doing better? Because I may not be able to help. And you're now going to tell me exactly where you think you could be doing better. And we're going to have a conversation about that. And at the end of that conversation, you may have convinced me that, yeah, it's time to make a change.
Right.
There's an awful lot of psychology involved in sales. Not that you want to misdirect people, but you have to maintain control of the conversation and you have to take them down a path, go down a path with them to figure it out together.
Right.
But the problem is that when anybody engages with someone that they think is a salesperson, they immediately put a barrier up like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're talking to you like this the whole time, and they might look around the side. How do you get them to drop that wall, whether or not they buy from you? Because when they drop the wall, that's where you start to get to the truth. Mark, you've been in conversations with people where they're hemming and hawing, and you say something or ask something, and all of a sudden they look at you and they lean in and they say, "Okay, let me tell you what's really going on." And that's where you start to get the truth. So, how do you make sure you get there each and every conversation, whether or not they buy from you? It's not about selling, it's about getting to the truth. Because if the truth is we figure out they don't need you or can't afford you, there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody's going to be my client or your client. But if you find out that, hey, they actually do need me, they need me badly based on everything they're telling me,
Yeah.
they're going to be happy they had the conversation. But it's getting them past that point to drop the barrier. What I used to call it decades ago was moving around the desk, where people realize you've come from sitting across from them to moving around sitting next to them, looking at the problem through their eyes. He's not trying to sell me. He's trying to figure out if he can help me. I like him. I'll talk to him. That's what goes through their head.
Mm, mm,
Once you get to that point, now you can start figuring it out together. And it's not an act of selling so much as figuring out, do they really need a solution to this problem? Or do they just want to complain about the problem? Okay, they really need a solution. It's costing them a lot of money. Do they have the money? Are they ready, willing, and able to pay for the solution?
mm,
A lot of
mm.
times we don't find that out till the end. How about
Yeah.
if we found that out in the first conversation? And how do they make decisions? Am I dealing with a person who can actually say yes, or just the one who's gathering information?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If I have those three pieces, pain, budget, and decision, and they have a problem they've got to fix, it's mission critical. It's costing them $10,000 a week or a month or a year, whatever. It's a lot of money to them, and they want to plug that leak now. It's a 10 on a scale of 10. They're ready, willing, and able to spend 5 grand. You can fix it for less than 5 grand with your product or service. And you're the owner and the decision maker. You're ready to get this fixed. The sale's already made. I haven't even shown you anything, and you've told me what you want, what you'd be willing to pay for it, and that you're ready to make a decision. Now all I have to do is show you the solution you asked for at the price you asked for it. Is that what you said you needed? Uh-huh. Is that the price you said you wanted to pay? Uh-huh. So what do you think you should do, sir? You let them make a decision. You don't have to pressure them.
So why does your sales strategies and sales techniques go against the industry norms? Because this is not what most salespeople are taught.
No, most salespeople, it's you hold them down, I'll go through his wallet. It's high pressure. And people buy in spite of the high pressure, not because of it. I hate it when I'm pressured. We've all been through a timeshare thing one time in our life and said, oh my God, never again. Or you've been to a car dealer. Hi, can we sell you a car today? I love car dealers. They're fun to deal with. So
So why is your philosophy so different to the way that people are traditionally trained in sales?
most salespeople try to convince, and I don't. I let you, Mr. Prospect, convince me that you actually have a problem you need to fix. I let you convince me that you're ready, willing, and able to spend the money. I let you convince me you're the decision maker. Once you've convinced me of those things, if I just show you what I think the solution is at the price that you just mentioned or lower than that, now my job is to help you make a decision. Yes is a decision, no is a decision. I have been married for 31 years as of April 10th. It's a second marriage for both of us. I still introduce her as my last wife, okay? If I go to
Is that your latest wife, or is that the final wife you're gonna have?
It's 31 years. It's a second marriage for both of us. Divorce is not an option. My death is an option, okay? But if I go to my lovely wife and say, honey, how about tonight? And she says, let me think it over. I know that's a no. And in sales, when people say, this looks good, but let me think it over, 93% of the time, it's a polite no. But if they're thinking it over while they coming to the no, you're not talking to them. Your job is to get them to tell you no today while they're in front of you. People say, I want to think it over. I'd say, Mark, I completely understand that. Can I be honest with you, man? Normally, when people tell me they want to think it over, it means they're really not interested, but a lot of them don't have the heart to tell me. Is that what's going on here, man? It's okay. You can be honest. See how I'm creating a place where you can be honest and tell me it's really a no.
Yeah.
Because if you tell me it's a no, I don't have to make 122 phone calls to you and fill up your voicemail box. You don't want that, and I don't want that. Is it over? It's okay. You can tell me if it is. And now, if he's really got to think it over as someone else to check with, that's going to float to the surface. Sometimes people are internal decision makers. They want a day just to let it sit. How to understand that. Sometimes they're doing this just to get away from you. So part of what we have to do is we have to learn how to read the situation. There's a lot of psychology involved. You got to read facial tics. You got to read micro expressions. You got to read the tonality in the voice if you're on the phone. because tonality is most of the communication. Tonality carries 5 times the amount of information as the words. Did you
Yeah.
know that?
I did
Facebook.
actually. I'd actually read something where it's the way you deliver it, not necessarily the words that you say, that has the biggest impact.
When we're face to face, 55% of our communication is body
Body
language,
language. Yeah.
facial expression, the background, whether I'm paying attention, all of this stuff, whether my eyebrows go up. This is how you are getting more than half of the information from me.
Mm.
38% is my tonality, and 7% is the words when we're face
Mm.
to face. If I
Mm.
turned off the camera and went dark, 83% is tonality, 17% is the words. And people want me to tell them what to say, and really more important is how do you say it. Remember the line from A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson? You want the truth, you can't handle the truth.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. If he had said it like that, hey, Tom, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. Son, we live in a world. If he had done it like that, you wouldn't remember it.
Yeah.
But how did he do it? You want the truth, you can't handle the truth. And he nailed that. And you remember it because of the tonality and the physicality, the spit coming out of his mouth as he was saying the words.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
did that 7 times when they were shooting it. Rob Reiner had an interview, and he said, we had to do the reaction shots from Kevin Bacon and everybody else in the courtroom. We shot Jack first, and then he did the same thing 7 times over, exactly the same way each time. Sales is a Broadway play put on by a psychiatrist. That's a David Sandler quote.
Love it.
Okay? And here's the thing, it's acting, but it's not disingenuous. Sometimes I have to act surprised when it was exactly what I was expecting they were going to say, because the surprised reaction will get them to open up.
Yeah.
Our job is to create a place where they can tell us what's really going on, so then we can figure out together if we can fix it. That's what truth based selling is about. Creating a place where they can tell you the truth, and then you never let them buy something unless they win bigger than you. I sell you a $10,000 fix to your problem. I get my $1,000 commission. My company made its $3,000 in profit, and you fixed a $30,000 problem. You won bigger than me.
Yeah. What are the common mistakes that business owners make with regards to sales?
They want their people to learn don't work. You have talking points, that's fine, but scripts do not work. Also, I read the book once, 586 surefire closing lines. And nobody on the way, always on the way home from the meeting, oh, line number 712. I should have used number 712. You don't remember things like that.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to respond to people, how to communicate with people. And unfortunately, with a lot of people, younger generations, they're not nearly as conversant. They don't know how to have real meaningful conversations. And if they're going into sales, this is going to hurt them drastically. Spending my time on a screen, looking at a phone, texting everything is not the same as talking to people. They default to email because I'll send them an email because calling is impolite. No, bullshit. I don't know if I can use that on this
You can. It's
podcast,
absolutely fine.
but that you've got to pick up the phone. Companies do not do business with companies. People do business with people.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to talk to people and get people engaged in a conversation, how to be interested in them and how to be interesting. This guy's interesting. I want to talk to him. That's what you need to be. And it's tough because a lot of people don't have that skill anymore.
And another thing that people are told in sales conferences and taught how to is to talk about the features of a business. Now, I know you don't like people necessarily talking of features. You want people to have real conversations, have honest conversations, and ask really important questions. But it's
Well,
easier to just tell them, well, these are the features of the product or service.
people do not buy features, advantages, and benefits. People buy one thing. Will this item or service fix the problem that I have? It's about being a problem solver for people. It doesn't matter. We talk about stainless steel, aluminum, stainless steel silverware, right? You don't care that it's stainless steel. You want it because the old stuff rusted and this won't rust. Or the old stuff bent and this won't bend. You're trying to fix the bend or the rust. You don't care. If it was a different material and it fixed it, it wouldn't matter that it's stainless steel. The other thing about features, advantages, and benefits are this. Mark, you own a podcast company. What are the three major benefits of using you rather than somebody else?
The coaching,
Good.
the ease, it basically we make it very easy for people, and it can be designed around their schedule.
Perfect. Now, here's the problem with features, advantages, and benefits. Let's say today your office gets hit after you've left with a meteor. You are completely out of business. You go to work for your biggest and best competitor tomorrow. What are the three things you're going to tell me about the new company?
Exactly what they do, their features
What
of their
are
service.
the three things you just told me about your thing? We do it properly. We make you comfortable, right?
Yeah.
You'll hit the audience you want. You're going to tell me the same three things. Features, advantages, and benefits are transferable from company to company. Your competition's saying the same thing you are. A lot of times your competition is cheaper than you. True?
Yes, some of our competitors are cheaper. Yeah.
And when somebody says your competition is cheaper, what's the standard comeback that most salespeople give to something like that?
I don't know
Mark, your
what
competition.
I would say we're better than the competition.
And what I would say is, how come you didn't hire them? Competition's cheaper. How come you didn't hire them? Mark, you knew they were cheap when they gave you the price, right?
Mm.
Something held you back. What held you back, man? Why didn't you buy from the cheap guy?
Probably they weren't convinced that the service.
But, but you're not looking for good service. You're just looking for cheap. You're
Well,
not
that's
looking
it.
for.
Most people use the price as a driving factor, but if you're going to over deliver, then you'll pay more. You will pay them more to get the better service.
Rather than try and justify my price, I say to people, you knew that was cheap when he gave you that number. How come you didn't hire him on the spot?
Mm,
Something held
mm.
you back, right? Well, and then they're going to tell you why they didn't buy from him. He didn't seem as knowledgeable. His references weren't as good. But look, you're not looking for that. You're just looking for cheap. Why don't you give him a try? And if it doesn't work, and they'll back off from it really fast. Rather than me saying, I'm better because that's what everybody else is going to say. I'm sitting on his side saying, man, you knew that was cheap. How come you didn't buy that one?
Mm, mm.
It was rusted on the side. You're not looking for, you don't care about the rust. You just want it cheap, right? Oh, no, it can't be rusted. You think you're going to have to pay more if there's no rust? How much do you think you're actually going to have to pay? But you're not willing to do that, are you? Oh, no, I'm going to have to. And watch them convince themselves in front of you that I shouldn't buy the cheap one. Mark, they will always believe what comes out of their mouth. People never argue with their own data. So if I can ask the right questions the right way, I can get the prospect to say what I wanted to say, but now they've said it, so they have to believe it.
Yeah.
This is powerful. It's not easy to do, but it is very powerful. And the key is you prevent people from making a buying mistake. Whether it's buying from you or not buying from you, you prevent them from making a mistake because you're ethically looking at this and you're building a tremendous amount of empathy with them and you're figuring it out together. You're problem solving with them. You're not selling them anything. It's a good way to look at it, I guess. I don't know if I answered your question. I forgot what
No, you
I
did
was.
absolutely. So, do you have weekly sessions with a small, intimate group that you're helping with? And
Well, the only way you get better at anything is ongoing training. Tiger Woods at the top of his game has two or three coaches that he sees every week.
mm,
And yet salespeople go years without seeing a coach or going to a class or doing anything to grow. So once a week, hour and a half, and I tell people, I'll save you at least 3 hours of wasted time a week for that hour and a half. You'll stop chasing people that you'll figure, oh, that wasn't going to buy it. They weren't going to buy from me anyway.
yeah.
You'll get through gatekeepers quicker. You'll shorten your sales cycle. You'll increase your close ratio. And bottom line, you have more fun.
You
I'm
mentioned
in
about
business.
fun. You mentioned
Yeah,
about fun, and it's important to you, isn't it? The whole fun element is something that you talk of, and give me your motto
well,
that you live your life by.
my corporate and personal vision statement is 6 words: have fun, help people, make money. Or have fun, help people make money, which is what I do as a trainer. If I'm not having fun, I don't want to be there, and neither does anybody else. And helping people, I think we're all put here, whether it's in business or personal, whatever you want to think about that, to help other people. And money is nothing more than a lubricant for life. That's all it is. It makes life easier. You can't buy happiness, but you can rent it. That's the old adage. But the bottom line is when you have enough money that life is okay, everything else seems to fall into place.
Who is your ideal client? Who is the people that you're looking to be able to help on this weekly training?
Two groups. The first are independent consultants. The name of my company and website is consultantscansell.com. And I put that website together during the pandemic when I ran into a lot of consultants who were extremely good at what they did. But the one skill they didn't have, Mark, was the ability to pick up that phone and generate business on a regular basis. They weren't comfortable, they didn't have the confidence, but they did not want to be salespeople. The second group that I help are professional salespeople who know that looking like a non salesperson is a much more powerful way to sell. When I was selling consulting services out there for 8 years, the only job I've ever held from 95 to '03 up in Boston, New York, and Florida. We sold the bakery, I went to work for a consulting company. And they said, sell one in the first month. Consulting services are not something business owners want to buy. So they set me up talking to business owners 40 to 65 years old in upstate New York. A girl named Janet set the appointments. Janet had a sexy voice. I'm not sexy. Okay. I'm not George Clooney. So I come walking in at 8:30 in the morning to you, a business owner. I say, Mark, I'm really sorry, but Janet couldn't make it today. She's stuck in Boston, which was the truth. She was on the phone in Boston. Would it be okay if I filled in? They'd look at their watch and say, okay. And they'd grumble and I'd come in. Lots of bonding and rapport, right? Completely out of rapport. My job was to get this business owner to tell me everything about their business in the next hour. Dollar volume, profitability, problems, exit strategies, marketing, personnel issues, cash flow issues, and then to hire us to come in and fix it. Now, this is on a Friday. I'm in upstate New York. He's planning on going to his lake house for the weekend on the Finger Lakes, right? I
Mm.
come in. My job is to ruin his day and get him to focus on the things that are wrong with their business. They said, if you can sell one in the first month, you're the golden child. They gave me 15 appointments a week. First week I go out there, I had 15 appointments, three of them canceled. So I had 12. I sold three out of 12. They were hoping for one out of 60. I sold nine in the first month. I was a business owner. I knew how to talk to other business owners. I knew how to bond and get that wall down very quickly. They said, this one might know what he's doing. In the 8 years I stayed there, and I still have the records, my close ratio is between 17 and 31% every week over week in an industry that had a 5 to 6% average. 10% was considered good. And all that I did was utilize the system that I'm teaching, and it worked. When I bought a Sandler training office in '03, they decided they were going to limit my income, so I opened a Sandler training office. April Fool's Day, actually, the anniversary is tomorrow. I opened it in '03, 20 plus years ago. In 8 months, I made Rookie of the Year. I made bronze, silver, and gold level, and I've got everything back to the diamond level on the wall there. I knew what I
Is,
was doing, man.
is there anything unethical about the way that you're selling?
I always make sure that people only buy what they need. It is ethical selling to the truest extent. I will tell people, no, you shouldn't buy this. This isn't going to fix it for you. I will take money out of my own pocket rather than make a sale that is not ethical. I've had people who said, train my team. I got 8 people here. And I'll say 5 of them are good. I wouldn't waste money on these other 3. Sometimes they'll put them in and say, look, I can't leave them out because
Mm.
Eddie's been here for 14 years.
Yeah.
And they put them in, they sit in the back and they're wasting their money. But I will tell them up front, these 5 are trainable. This one might be. These 2, I think you're wasting your money on. So please don't put them in my class. And that's a couple $1,000s a month I could get for those people. But I'd
Mm.
rather not take them than to take the wrong people. You've got to do that in business. It's not short term, it's long term. Because
Mhm.
2 years from now, 5 years from now, they'll go, you know what? He told me the truth. He told me not to spend money on this guy, and he was right.
Mm.
I
Mm.
like guy I trust.
How do you flex your style when you're talking to startups versus established businesses?
There's something called equal business stature. You assume equal business stature with anyone you meet, whether they're a multimillionaire or whether they're a startup. and talk to them the way you'd want to be talked to in that situation. We can start talking about personality styles and disc styles. We have to
Mm,
modify our communication style based upon the person we're with.
mm,
You and I are very direct with each other. That's how we are. Some people like to talk about social stuff, and some people will tell stories and do all sorts of stuff like that. And some people are very unemotional. Some people are extremely emotional. You have to match and mirror whatever they are, because the more like you that they are, more like them that you are, the more they like you.
mm. And what about
And let's
this
talk about,
known trust? It's a word that it's a phrase that's thrown around a lot. And think in most cases it's the bedrock, the ethos of sales is being able to create that rapport that people know and trust you.
well, I've never really had a problem with it. And I think part of that comes from growing up in the retail business. In the retail business, you've got to get up and you've got to talk to strangers. Somebody walks into your store, hi, can I help you today? You've got to instantly be friendly to someone that you've never seen before. By the way, people who say, can I help you when you walk into a retail store, it's a complete loss. What you need to say is, hi, welcome to such and such store. Is this your first time here? There's two answers to that. Yes, it is, or no, it isn't. Yes, it is. Great. What brought you in? No, it isn't. What brought you back? It's a different track than hi, can I help you? No, just looking. Because no,
Mm,
just looking is the standard answer to that. So ask them something different. You have to break the pattern of what people expect. It's called pattern interrupt. When you break the pattern, people don't know how to deal with it. I get into an elevator. We just took a long cruise. I get into the elevator's packed, the door's closed. What do people do in an elevator, Mark? They all look at the number, right?
yeah.
I get in last and I turn around and I face everybody in the elevator. They're all looking at me. The elevator doors closed behind me. I look around. I said, good. Now I got you all together. Let me tell you why I called this meeting. Everybody erupts in laughter. And there's a synergy. And all of a sudden, people start talking to each other. So your job is to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. To be able to change the temperature of the room when you walk in, not be able to tell the temperature of the room. You like that?
Mm.
Be the thermostat. You got to be able to heat it up, cool it off. You got to be able to take the conversation in a direction. You got to learn how to steer people. You got to learn how to challenge people. A lot of times, salespeople don't challenge the individual. Look, sir, I get the feeling you really don't want to fix this. You just want to complain about it. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, there are people who
and,
just want
and watch the expression on their face. They're like, huh? What? No, I really want to fix it. No, you don't. If you wanted to fix it, you would have done this 6 months ago. Why? You just want to complain to me? And then they have to convince you that they want to fix it now, which
mm,
is really what you want, isn't it?
mm.
But unless you challenge them, it's Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If I try to pull you towards yes, you're going to pull towards no. But if I gently try to pull you towards no, you really don't want to fix this right now. Well, yes, I do. You go closer to yes, don't you? And if I pull you again, if you're going to be a yes, you will take yourself there. I don't have to do anything.
So what you've been talking about on this show is so much related to psychology and the psychology of meeting a stranger,
Of
diffusing the
communication.
situation, yeah, communication, but it's based on psychological bedrocks and what people are. So how did you learn that? Is there a book or is there a number of books? What made you move
Oh,
that step that psychology was the bedrock of what was going to make you a successful salesman and sales trainer?
if you've never taken a disc test, I would recommend anybody listening to this go online, type in free disc, DISC test, and take it. It'll take you 20 minutes, answer the
Yeah,
questions honestly,
brilliant.
and you'll get a little picture as to how you are. There's something called transactional analysis. The book is Games People Play by Dr. Eric Byrne, Parent, Adult, Child, Ego States. All of our buying decisions are made by our 6-year-olds. I'll prove it to you. About 20 years ago, I went to my wife's high school reunion, and one of her friends had a Harley, and we started talking about motorcycles. So we went over to Reg's house, and on Sunday he said, "You want to go for a ride?" And he let me take his Sportster around the block. He saw I could actually ride. He said, "You want to take your wife?" I said, haven't ridden in 30 years, not comfortable with her on the back. He said, I'll take the fat one. We go off in the hills of Vermont. By the way, my wife was voted best preserved at her 30th reunion. And so 6 months later, I had a Harley. And there's my
Oh,
wife in the Blue Ridge Mountains, okay, next to the bike. Now, my mother said no 54-year-old man needs a Harley. I thought we were done with the motorcycles in 75 when you sold the Triumph Bonneville. Logically, my mother was right. But my 6-year-old on the inside said, ooh, the blue and white one is so cool. And 25 grand later, I had a Harley. We make buying decisions emotionally. We justify them logically. I can afford $239 a month. That was the adult. But my 6-year-old said, get the blue one, get the blue one. And if we realize that our clients buy emotionally before they write the check logically, and stop trying to sell them logically, which is features, advantages, and benefits, and find out what really hurts. Because
right.
what really hurts will motivate them because they want to stop the pain. Does that make sense? But it's having those conversations with people that people don't know how to do. And that's what I teach. How do you get people to open up with you about the stuff that they don't even tell their VP about?
Yeah.
I'm going to have trouble making payroll next week. That kind of stuff. How do you become a trusted advisor in 20, 30 minutes of a meeting with them? I've literally had people half an hour, 45 minutes into a meeting saying, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I just met you. And my standard comment is, look, if you're uncomfortable, we can stop right here, but nothing's going to leave this room unless you want it to. Is this stuff you really want to fix? Do you think we should keep talking about it or stop here? I've never had anybody stop. They always keep going. You
So one
have
of
to
the,
be nurturing. You have to be
yeah.
nurturing sales. You have to nurture them through a difficult conversation.
So something that you emphasize is diagnosing before prescribing. How does this apply to sales?
If you walked in to see a doctor and you said, Doc, my hip hurts, he says, we got a special on new hips. In fact, we have an opening this afternoon. Hop up here on the table. I'll get the anesthesiologist in here. We'll have you right as rain. It's going to take about 6 weeks to recover. You say, whoa, Doc, you haven't even taken a CAT scan yet. You're not going to cut so quick. You'd run from that doctor's office. So many salespeople, you walk in to talk to them and they say, boy, do I have a solution for you. And you go, ooh. How about if we diagnose? It's called malpractice in medicine if you write a prescription without a diagnosis. So, as a salesperson, before you say, people say, how much is what you do going to cost? Hang on. Before I talk to you about what a podcast is going to cost, can we figure out if a podcast is actually going to do you and your company any good? Because about 30% of the people I talk to, it's really not the right way to spend their money.
Mm, mm.
And they go, all right, I'll talk to this guy. He wants to be straight with me. That little pushback that you give at the beginning like that builds a tremendous amount of credibility.
What would you say your risk appetite is?
I'll always bet on myself. I do not gamble. My wife and I go to Vegas, cruise ships. I don't think we put $20 through the slot machines in 20 years. And we don't play blackjack or anything like that. But I'll gamble on myself because that's a bet I know I can control. When you start a business, it's a risk. Let me tell you, I have more
That
house
that
in my.
that's what I want to explore a little bit more because you've started businesses, you've run businesses, you've been involved in all different industries, but you always had confidence that you could turn it round, you could solve the problem, you could make more sales, you could build that business.
Yeah, I started out my very first business. You're going to love this. I was 11 years old. My dad, mom let me get a couple of guinea pigs. I got 4 guinea pigs. Turns out 3 of them were female. 6, 8, 10 weeks later, I had 27 guinea pigs. So my mom, being a good mom, took me out to a local farm in South Jersey, and I bought a bale of hay for $1.25. We went over to the feed store. I bought a big bag of rabbit feed, and they started to get big. A couple of weeks later, I had these guinea pigs all over the place. I gave guinea pigs away to all the kids in the neighborhood, and I went in the food and the hay business. I sold hay for 25 cents a shopping bag. The brown shopping bags,
Yeah,
bring a brown shopping bag, as much hay as you can get into it, 25 cents. The bale of hay cost $1.25. You can get hundreds of shopping bags full of hay out of one bale.
yeah.
And I was selling food by the scoop. So that's where, at 11 years old, 12 years old, that was my first business.
Right.
Like the demand fulfilled it. So I guess it's genetic.
What do you still want to achieve?
I'm going to help more people. I enjoy what I do. I'm going to keep doing it until I don't enjoy it anymore. Right now, I work to support my wife's cruise habit because we cruise a couple of times a year, do long cruises. And I teach my classes from the cruise ship. I just buy the internet service. And I've taught from Europe, I've taught from Amsterdam, I've taught from France.
Can you give me an example of someone that you've worked with and you've been able to turn around their business?
There's a guy out there as a sales trainer right now. I'm not going to mention him by name, but he's doing very well. And he started with me. His first name is Dale. He was playing in a rock band. His dad had a copier machine business over in Titusville. And when he was off the road, he would sell copy machines for his dad and had grown up in the business. He was doing 15 to $25,000 a month in used copy machine sales. He came into class and he said, "I'll do what you tell me to do." I said, "Okay." Now he had the big earring inserts in, the big black
Yeah.
things in his ears because he was a rocker, okay? And I was teaching a class on bonding and rapport, and I was talking about the fact that people with beards have trouble building trust because a lot of times people are looking at the beard rather than eye contact. So we have to concentrate on a little more eye contact. People who have a piercing here or in the nose or in the mouth, or they have 19 things in their ear, my eye is constantly going to your ear, and I'm not going to trust you as much, not because you're not trustworthy. I said, so this hurts you in sales. And while I'm talking, he pops the inserts out and puts them in his pocket and said, okay, what next? And from day one, he did that. That was in May. In in September, he hit $100,000 a month. In December, he did over $250,000, and his commission check was more than the 25 grand he used to sell. And he's now formed a company called Sales Rebellion, and he's out there teaching. But I was the first formal sales training that he had.
Amazing. And we've touched on this before, but I want to just loop back on this before we go into the quickfire questions. How much of sales is something innate in someone that they have a natural skill for it, and how much of it is actually learned that you can get much better at it?
Anyone can learn to sell, just like anyone can learn to play golf. I'm never going to hit the ball 300 yards, okay? But I can play golf. And I can play from the front tees because I'm older and I don't hit the ball. So I can level the game out. People that are accountants, people that are consultants, people that are attorneys can learn how to sell without being salespeople. Sales is nothing more than helping people make a decision that will solve their problem. Stop thinking about it as convincing people to do something and helping people make a decision that's in their best interest if
Mm,
you do it ethically.
awesome. Eric, coming to the end of the interview, I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions, but they don't need a quick fire answer. And they're a little
This
bit
is,
thought provoking.
this is like the Colbert questionnaire. They'll be
It
truly known at
is.
the end.
First question, Eric, what's the best decision that you've made?
Marrying my wife. She's in the other room. She heard that. I just made my truly. Her maiden name is Shulman, the same as mine. I tell everyone we're Jewish rednecks.
All right, next
But yeah,
question. What's
marrying my wife, the
Yeah,
best decision I ever.
good choice. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Regarding business or personal.
Either, both, if you.
When my dad told me you'll never get rich in the retail business, you'll always make a good living. That's what prompted me to go out on my own. So that was an excellent piece of advice from my dad. He was surprised when I decided I was leaving the business too, as I was and my mom was. But it was probably the best piece of advice I ever got.
And is the reason why you left a relatively comfortable business, possibly inheriting it and running it, was it because you wanted more money?
I was the eldest son and the only musician in the family. I was also a factory trained Gibson warranty repairman trained at the old factory in Kalamazoo. I was definitely the heir apparent, but I realized Retail is from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's 6 and 7 days a week. You don't have weekends, and you have a limited amount of income. You've got heavy inventory. So every business I've been in since then has been a no inventory business. The business I'm in now has no inventory, no materials. Everything I sell is in my head, in the manuals that I've got.
Mm.
So I have virtually no overhead, very low cost of goods. That's why I've structured the business the way I've structured it. I don't need 10 employees.
And you play the guitar?
Oh yeah, I
I can
still
see one
I have
behind you.
right up here is my Gibson Heritage from 1967
Oh,
that I've had
beautiful.
since '74. I've got 4 or 5 in the other room. You can see a couple of my ukes and such in the background here.
Yeah. What type of music do you play?
I am a late '60s, early '70s guy. Beatles, Eagles, Poco, Crosby, Stills, Nash,
Nice.
Bob Dylan, all of that stuff. I grew up in the '60s and '70s. I went to Woodstock in '69, and yes, I did inhale and still do.
Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Who's the person that's helped me most in my career? Again, I'd have to say my wife, Sharon. She's always supported me. When we decided to mortgage the house to buy the franchise in 2003, she was taking care of all the paperwork on that. She hasn't been able to work since the late 1990s because she's disabled, but she's always there to support.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Again, it focuses on my wife that I didn't meet her 20 years earlier. I'd be a lot better off financially if I hadn't had to go through the divorce. We call my ex-wife Voldemort. We do not refer to her by name because it gives her power. I'm kidding. Serious, we do.
And those, is it something you think about, regrets?
No, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what didn't happen. You got to let it go. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. So just keep pushing forward, having fun, helping people, and the money becomes a byproduct. To
Yeah.
have fun, help people. You can tell I'm having fun on this interview with you, right?
Yeah.
And my job is to try and help some people here. And if one or two of them want to call or attend a class, I invite anybody to come to one of my classes as a guest at any time. Try the class out. If nothing else, you'll make some friends, might make a couple of contacts, probably learn a couple of things. And if they want to talk further, they can do that.
Yeah. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? We have 4 kids. We've raised 3 functioning adults.
And what's happened to the last one?
He's sleeping indoors and he's supporting himself. Let's leave it at that.
Now, how old are your kids?
My kids are all from like 38 to 45 years old. They're 2 years apart. I had two. My wife had two. We didn't breed.
And I know you got grandchildren as well.
Yep, we just spent a week with Ripley and Wren. My grandchildren named Ripley and Wren, and the
Amazing.
mother's name is Laurel now. Yeah, we
That's
call her the
amazing.
daughter formerly known as Lauren because she changed her name 10 years ago when she got married.
Tell me one thing that most people don't know about you.
I said it earlier that I went to Woodstock, and I remember it. You want to see a picture?
Yeah?
Here's a picture of me from 1973. I'm
Oh,
the one on
wow.
the end. That's with
What
my
a
family. We're all in
what
the record.
hair and what moustache you've got. It's incredible.
I've had the mustache since I was 17. I've had the beard for most of the last 50 years. I shaved it off once in like mid 90s and didn't tell my wife about it. She didn't say a thing for the 5, 6 years that I had it off. And when I grew it back, she said, "That wasn't the face I married. This was the face I said, I'll never shave it off again."
Oh, that's amazing. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy to me means that there are people out there whose lives I've changed who realize and are willing to acknowledge it. I've got a lot of people who come to me and say, "Man, you changed my life." I took one guy from making 55,000 in 2004 working for T-Mobile, and he listened to everything that I told him to do. would coach with me every week, and he was the number one salesperson in the country and made 255,000 the following year in Orlando, which is not a major market. And he's made it, I think, 7 or 8 times out of the last 20 years. And we still play golf together occasionally. He's a scratch golfer, but he'll put up with me. Okay, if I break 90, I'm happy. But yeah, the impact that you make on people's lives, if you can change somebody's income, you don't only change their life, you change their family's life, their kids' life, the wife's, maybe mom and dad's life, what their retirement's going to look like, what their vacations are going to look like, the kind of schooling the kids are going to get. All of that changes with people. So I don't just teach sales. When I teach people how to make the money that they're actually worth, it literally they can change their life, and it gives them the power to do that. Because people who can sell, I'm 70 plus years old. If I came in and talked to you and said, Mark, I'm looking for a sales job, and after 15 minutes of talking to me, you'd want to hire me. And so if you can put people in that position where they're that strong, where
Mm.
any place they go, I'll leave you with this story. I interviewed when I was working for the consulting business with a company up in Jacksonville. I walked in at 3:30 in the afternoon for an interview at a hotel. The guy in front of me had just left. And the guy looked frazzled. He said, "Can I have a minute?" I said, "Sure." So he went into the restroom, and I looked out the window. He came out of the restroom, and he looked completely fried. His name was Bruce Crawford. I can remember his name. And I said, "You look like you've had a rough day." He said, "I've had an unbelievably rough day." I said, "Can I make this simple for you?" He said, "Please." I says, "You're looking for somebody that can walk in and talk to a business owner, level the playing field quickly, get them to tell you what's really going on with their business, and get them to see that they actually need some help, and hire us to do an exam of the business so they can have a map to move forward with." And he looked at me. He said, "Would you do me a favor?" I said, "What?" He said, "Would you tell me you'll take the job? Because I've been talking to turkeys all day. We'll go over to Applebee's and have lunch, and you can drop me at the airport." That was the shortest job interview anybody's ever had. I said, "Here's what you're looking for." He said, "Shit, this is my guy." So when you're going for an interview, and one of the things I do work with people is they're going in for interviews. If you can go in and you can level the playing field like that, and hit them right between the eyes where they go, "Oh, this guy knows what I'm looking for. He's probably my one." You can all of a sudden move to the top of the stack.
Amazing. And
We,
lastly,
we
where
don't,
can sorry, go on, carry on. No, go and
I was going to
finish.
say, we don't miss it by yards, we miss it by millimeters.
Yeah, yeah, that is so true. So true. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you or have a conversation about you and your business?
Consultantscansell.com is the website. I have another website called aninsideman.com, but go to the Consultants Can Sell website. There's a contact information there. I teach on Tuesdays from 10 to 11:30. I teach a foundations class on Wednesdays. If anybody wants to come to a class, pop me an email, and I'll be more than happy to invite you. And if you want to have a conversation, my Calendly link is there. Just pop out and tell me you want 15 or 30 minutes with me. We'll chat. At the very least, we'll make friends. And if I can point you in a direction, that's great. And if you need what I have, we'll figure that out together.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been so insightful, so much value, and you're just a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Mark, it's been a pleasure to be here. Maybe next time we'll talk about negotiating, okay?
Yeah, we can do. Absolutely. Right. Thanks, Eric.